Hey, Last Mile DeFi family, we are back here with another podcast, this time with Camila Rioja. Mila, as many of us know her by, is the LatAm lead at the Celo Foundation. So at this point, and largely by pure coincidence, we've heard from three different builders in the Celo community: Jorge and Gabriela from Ethic Hub, James Downer from Rola, and Jackie Bona from Valora. This is a really fascinating conversation, which essentially lays down the groundwork as to why there have been so many builders within the Celo ecosystem that are so focused on enabling better, more prosperous futures for all. In many ways, this conversation is a capstone and a recap to explore exactly how Celo has managed to bring so many builders into their ecosystem that are passionate about bringing more prosperous futures to Latin America. So Mila left her role as a partner at a law firm and then fell down the proverbial crypto rabbit hole. She now gets to fuse her passion for technology and law together. She walks us through why she made this decision, what she sees in the Latin American region, and why she believes that we are fertile ground to enable more prosperous futures powered by decentralized technologies. She also explains what Celo's unique positioning is, both from a technological standpoint, the unique offering that Celos bring to the table, and their commitment to environmental regeneration. Her thesis, and I'm sure that many of us listening to this podcast believe in this as well, is that Latin America is ready to bring about change that is powered by this new blockchain technology. Mila also walks us through the various opportunities that builders can engage with the Celo ecosystem, irrespective of where they are along their builder journey. For those of you that care about the fundamentals of how we go about building better substrates for coordination, this is certainly a fascinating conversation. Enjoy, my friends. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Last Mile DeFi. Today, I am joined by Camila Rioja from the Celo team. Camila, it's amazing to have you here. Welcome to the podcast.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Hi, everybody. A great pleasure to be here. Thank you for this invitation. I'm super excited.
Absolutely. So, Camila, or Mila, as some people know you, I'd love to, start with a little bit of the basics, what you're up to at Celo and what your role is there.
Sure. I have been in the Celo ecosystem for a little over 2 years, and now I'm with the Celo Foundation, and my role is Latin American lead. And it's a fancy name, right? But what it means down the line is that I have this amazing role in which I can have meaningful conversations with founders, understand what their needs are and how to amplify them, either through grants or to programs and projects. I also have the amazing opportunity to make partnerships rather with institutional players and sometimes even with governments, as it has happened more than one time throughout Latin America. Moreover, I also take on very relevant invitations like this one to discuss what we have been doing. So that's kind of what I do.
Awesome. You are truly the perfect person to be discussing kind of the role that Celo plays in Latin America. So really looking forward to this conversation. But let's start with the basics. I always think it's super important to get to know people, kind of understand their crypto journey, how they ended up where they are today. So walk the audience through, how did you get to being the LatAm lead at Celo, even your time before crypto. I know it's hard to imagine sometimes, but, we all had our pre-crypto days. So walk us through, how did you get to where you are today?
I remember that the first time I told the story of how I got into crypto in public, I asked people not to throw tomatoes at me. It was a joke. I was at LabitConf on stage, and I had to tell all the maxes that I was a lawyer in my previous life. So that's how it went. Of course, they laughed. I'm just making a little bit of a joke here, but it's actually an interesting way through which I entered crypto, I believe. As a lawyer, I was always super curious about how to do things in a different way. And much like the finance industry, right, there are so many things in the legal area and practice that are just broken. Just because this is such an old profession, the way that we think about solving problems, or maybe the tools that we use. So I was always challenging myself on how to acquire a different set of skills or knowledge that would, help me do things in a different way. So I started studying the intersection of law and technology. And I was part of a DAO without a DAO that is called Legal Hackers. It's an amazing global distributed movement that is live in over 200 cities. And the idea of this movement is to propose or help people to get to the point of proposing creative solutions in the intersection of law and technology. So my path was it started very much related to what a lawyer can do, right? So what does a lawyer do? We read a lot, we study a lot. After we accrue some knowledge, we start writing. So I was writing papers and articles about the intersection of law and technology and try to understand what different technologies would play a role in something like that. So I studied a lot about artificial intelligence, geometrics, which is something else that makes sense to the law. And at a certain point I said, cool, but now that I'm studying, reading, writing, and now teaching about creative solutions in the intersection of one thing and the other, I also want to build. So I had a startup. There was a legal technology startup in which we would experiment and plug and play with existing solutions that would, allow us to provide legal services in a different way. After a lot of that, I just started studying too much blockchain technologies. And when you just get sucked in, and that's what happened with me, because I had an aha moment in which I said, okay, I'm dealing with things after the problem or the situation is created. What if I could have a role in helping design systems that could effectively lead to a net positive outcome by default, by design, really in the roots of it. So that's what got me into crypto. It was really a builder's mindset. But the funny part that this was coming from a lawyer and not a builder per se. By the way, I already tried to code. I have so many stories about that, but I wait for you to ask when it's time.
Awesome. I love that I know lawyers, as you said, have this insatiable thirst for knowledge. And I'd love to explore a little bit so you went from, launching this legal tech startup and what took you to Celo? What was that journey like, sort of as you fell down the proverbial rabbit hole and immediately saw yourself transformed and warped and totally crypto pilled, as happens with so many of us. So what was it that you saw in Celo, and how did that journey sort of come about, and what led you to where you are today?
Now that I look back, things seem so clear. But when I was living through this, it was not Marcus. There was a lot of sometimes a bit of anxiety. Okay, I had a career in a law firm. I was partner of a law firm. What am I doing here? Does this lead to anything? So now that I'm telling you the story, it seems fun and lighthearted and flashy, but there were a lot of crazy moments. So I made a first decision to pivot my startup to be something more broad. So, hey, are you a founder or are you a company wanting to go from Web 2 to Web 3 or develop a new way to do your business? I'm your one-stop shop solution. So I was helping companies and founders to find their ways through Latin America, either designing the product or with go-to-market strategies with relevant introductions. And in this scenario, somebody introduced me. I found their own Celo. And this guy has an amazing life story. He's a Brazilian. He was born in Brazil, but actually he was raised in Europe. He was adopted by a family in Europe. And then he was building with passion, to link opportunities and solutions between these two different countries. And I was put in contact to him as a person that could be, advising him or helping his path through. And he was the person who stopped me at a dinner time and said, no, not me. Whole Celo ecosystem. You need to get to meet them. They think just like you do. So it was funny because I knew about a lot of layer 1s, layer 2s and different projects, but I didn't know Celo just yet. And the first testimony that I got from Celo, it was not by reading the white paper or by receiving a swag or anything like it, was by the words of a founder. And that's so meaningful when you hear the journey of a founder saying, hey, why did I choose this and the reasons X, Y, and Z. So that's how I got to Celo. Actually, Celo got to me in a very like candid way, and the words that got stuck to me from that conversation were the following: Celo means purpose in Esperanto, and the purpose is to create a system that generates conditions of prosperity to all, shared prosperity to everyone, and that resonated deeply with me because one of the some of the problems that I was trying to solve when I was a lawyer was exactly that, like access and understanding, and how do we make systems, that they have this approach. They're made for everybody to use. It's not only who speaks English, or not only who has studied X, Y, or Z terms, or not only for the people who know how to code, not only for, there's always like a set of parameters and standards, of how you play a role into something that is changing the world. And the idea of Celo doing like not only a technology, but building a community that generates conditions of prosperity to all was something that really got to me. So that's why me on Celo and Celo on me.
Amazing, amazing. I think that, you mentioned earlier on as well the trajectory that it took you to get to here and the risk you had to take as well, right? You were a partner at a law firm, and then all of a sudden you get crypto pilled and you're like, oh my gosh, I want to learn more about this whole like crazy world. And taking that leap oftentimes can feel really scary. And I also think that on the other side of the leap is that moment, that aha moment where you end up precisely where you're meant to end up. And so I think it's like an amazing story to hear that like you had this strong resonance with Celo. And, I think this idea, and I have the Celo shirt, right, that says prosperity for everyone. I think that's like precisely what has always called me towards the Celo ecosystem as well, is understanding more of how do we build an ecosystem. At this point, the listeners will have heard about James Downer from the Rola project, as well as with Jackie Bona from Valora as well. And so this is really kind of the third exposure where the audience has heard about Celo. So on that point, I'm wondering, for those that may not be as intimately familiar with like the Celo ecosystem, can you just give us like an overview of Celo, the offering that you guys are bringing to the table, how it differs from other blockchains in the space so far? Let's start there.
Sure. Yeah. So as we discussed here, right, is the motto of Celo is like building with purpose and building for all. So Celo is a mission first, planet positive blockchain ecosystem, leading, positive change and positive externalities in the ecosystem as a whole. So it is a blockchain protocol. It is a community of builders. Celo came to life on Earth Day 2020. In terms of numbers, there's over 19 million unique wallets. There are over 1,000 projects building on Celo. Over, I think, $60 million were granted in grants, right, to the public the past year. There is a mission and a target to serve mobile phone users. So when Celo was built with that mindset. Okay, we want prosperity to be shared, and prosperity needs to be for everyone. But can it be for everyone if it's not on a mobile phone, right, in the hands of everybody? So when we talk about like a mission and a vision, and it's very interesting that at this point you've spoke with founders on the Celo ecosystem. You really need a technology that is like the basis for that. So that's the blockchain. You need the purpose, but you also need to make sure that your product or project really gets adoption, by the individuals. So, okay, so what are the real world use cases? What can I do with like X, Y, or Z apps that have Celo on its background, but they are going to like impact lives? So I think this is like a common denominator that you're going to see in different parts of the Celo ecosystem. It's like building for positive impact and also building for real world use cases. I think there's over 170 million transactions. This number changes every day. And another very interesting thing is that everything by default that is registered on Celo that is proof of stake. It's a fork of Ethereum, and it's proof of stake. has its carbon credits compensated. This is automatic. You don't need to think about like building a part of your project specific to compensate, because the Celo blockchain is already doing it by default. So one thing that I think it's important to mention is that Celo gets the purpose and the mission and the theory, and then hacks the tools and the technology that are able to put us closer to this mission. So I think that's how I would introduce Celo blockchain and community.
Amazing. And I'm sure a lot of folks are obviously going to be really familiar with like the Ethereum ecosystem as well. So I'd love to understand more of what Celo was a response to, right? So what was the need for Celo to emerge that hadn't previously existed prior to Earth Day 2020?
That's a very interesting question, right? So I think the motto was that, okay, how do we make the blockchain technology accessible and create some sort of an infrastructure that is going to lead to the building of products that are going to serve like mass consumers, or they're going to be focused on preserving the nature. So one of the things is that a Celo as a blockchain is optimized as mobile first. So I think this was one like of the positionings of this launching that was relevant. The second was like being inherent, like close and compatible with Ethereum. So it's EVM. There are all sorts of like compatibility, not only in terms of like technology, but also in terms of how we see the world and what we want to see built. This is more on the theoretical side again, but also that has like practical, like technical applications. The other thing that I think is important is the ability to pay gas fees and any local stable assets. So besides like Celo, right? You also have Celo dollars, Celo euros, and Celo reais, which are community tools to provide like different services and applications, including for DeFi, right? On their local currencies. So this, opportunity for you to pay gas fees, they're lower and easier on a like stable currency. It's also something that seemed to make sense for the community and for the people who were building on it. And of course, I could not like end this without mentioning it's really this regenerative finance focus. So how do we get out the building blocks for the builders who are going to like be focusing on refi solutions?
Amazing. Yeah, I definitely think that being able to build an ecosystem around regeneration is super crucial, right? And being able to focus and have this sort of shelling point that is the Celo blockchain is crucial in order for us to scale planetary regeneration, enabling prosperity for all, so on and so forth. So I'm really excited to sort of dive into that as well, sort of later on in the conversation. But before getting into that and, sort of the wider ecosystem that Celo has built, and by the way, it is to some extent coincidence that it just so happens that quite a number, 3 out of the 10 or so guests that are going to be on this podcast are builders within the Celo ecosystem, right? Like that was, as I was reaching out to all the different folks that I wanted to speak with that had done a really amazing job of enhancing adoption in Latin America. A lot of them were already like Celo builders, right? So it just speaks to the power of like the Celo community, right? And that's Ethic Hub, Roda, and Valora as well. So, I think there is so much that can be attested even through this podcast alone as far as like the Celo kind of network effects that have been built. So, but let's zoom into Latin America and let's explore a little bit of, your role as the LatAm lead. What are you seeing in Latin America, and why is Celo putting an emphasis on there? And, what is Celo ultimately like responding to in the region that is a really exciting opportunity?
So this question is super interesting to myself from different like reasons, right? And again, not to mention the background, but I when I was practicing, I was specialized in economics, and in some deals that were like global deals that involved legislation, regulation, and companies that were located all over the world. And sometimes the matches were, okay, there's a company that is located in Brazil and in the United States, or in Brazil, Peru, Bolivia, and Asia, and somewhere in Asia. So like all these different combinations, of like how businesses, initiatives, and entities would position themselves in different markets was something that was part of my previous life, prior to all the good pills. And then when I joined, like a little before like joining the Celo ecosystem, I was already focusing my activities in Latin America as a region. And this is my personal take first, then I can talk about Celo, but Latin America is vastly unique in terms of culture, we know that, but also in terms of richness. Our cultural heritage, it's something that it's unique. It's so amazing and it's so rich and can teach so much, I believe, not only to our region, but also to the world when it comes to how we take care of each other, how we nurture like our relationship with the environment, how we survive and thrive even before like different enemies or complex conditions that happen to us either by nature or by the forces of how the history was built. So I always saw a lot of power and a lot of richness on that. And I also think that in more organizational terms, our whole region, it's open and prone to innovation in a very like welcoming manner. And we can talk about how individuals behave in face of that and how like companies and governments behave on the face of that. Like Brazil and Latin America, sometimes we have some of the highest numbers in adoption when it comes to mobile games, or anything that you do by doing like mobile transfers. We all have like such an amazing participation in different social media. That means that we live a lot of our lives online. So there's not like a barrier when it comes to much of a barrier when it comes to like adopting a technology that is on a mobile phone from a consumer perspective. When we look at like companies and governments, I also think that we have naturally a hacker mind. The reason why I say this is because we have been through so much, and the conditions here sometimes they're not the easiest, but we usually come out on the other side with solutions, with good mood, excellent food, awesome like cultural heritage and parties. So I think there is a mindset, a Latin American mindset, that all together with conditions of legislation and some more flexible ways to see technology and to experiment technology, make the whole Latin America as a very fertile ground for something like emergent technologies. So this is how I always saw things. And when it comes to like matching this, which is my background, my mindset, and the way I like to do things with the mission of Celo, it was just like a natural fit, because Celo is saying, hey, it's technology that is built for mobiles. It's cheap, it's fast, it has like a suite of tools that can allow people to either do their own decentralized stable assets or natural backed assets or like community currencies. And there's a whole like checklist of things that these founders on Celo are building, right? And how they're building it, that is really focused on like community usage, but also has all the high technology that is needed for mass adoption, also by institutional and incumbent like players. So I think it was just like this right match.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, undoubtedly, I think Latin America is ripe and ready, and already has proven to be a perfect space for crypto to really take off, right? So we've seen it in Argentina, in Venezuela, in El Salvador, right? And throughout, Brazil has one of the highest user activities of crypto as well, right? So clearly the region is ready and continues to prepare itself for more and more crypto adoption. And I'm super excited. And really the intention of this podcast is to sort of explore some of the utility, particularly when it comes to decentralized finance, around the opportunities that exist in the region. So I'd love to zoom in on that point specifically and explore, what role have you seen decentralized finance play in Latin America, and what challenges is it responding to? in the region. So, and we can, look at a couple of like Celo examples as well, but like what's the backdrop for incumbent financial institutions and what is offered to people today? And, where has Celo sort of stood up and said, this is the offering and this is how it's improving people's lives?
I spoke in your last question from a more broader level, right? And now, as you said, like deep diving on this, we also need to assess what are the differences between the countries in Latin America. Like in terms of like market maturity and readiness, and also like an existing builders community in each of these countries, or the possibility to build rails between the traditional financial system and crypto, they vary. Right. And I was very fortunate to be able to experience like firsthand in different countries how this would be playing out. So you mentioned El Salvador, right? So by the time the Bitcoin legislation was passed, I spoke internally and I said, I think we should be there. And everybody was like, okay, but this is a Bitcoin legislation. How does that impact the mission of Celo? And then looking through the lenses, right, that I always have on, it's a matter of, okay, different technologies have different like preferred or first use cases. I can understand as somebody from Latin America, maybe the economic and the whole context on how like the Bitcoin legislation came out to be in a country like El Salvador. But I also understand that the shift is being done in a very like fast manner. So shouldn't we be there doing a little bit of like the first listening to the individuals and the grounds? And that was my first thing. Okay, they will start with Bitcoin, but can't we just like go there and listen to what the community wants and what do they need from the Web3 and the crypto community? So the first approach was as simple as that. Like, who are the key relevant stakeholders in terms of like institutions like fintech association, banks, and so on and so forth, and even the government, but also like individuals. Can we talk with individuals? There was a similarity between all of them that was like, we want to understand blockchain technologies better. So at first, what we did in El Salvador, because of the time and the market maturity, that was one for Bitcoin, but one very different for other applications built on a blockchain, right? Was to explore blockchain use cases, how to build stuff. So I took 3 trips there, very different, but like very organized, like strategically on how to do it. The first one was like, okay, what do people want and can we serve it? Then we made a proposition on how we could, engage with the community. And at the time was providing what they wanted by hosting like a series of talks, and also like a small ideathon, not a proper hackathon, but an ideathon, and then leaving like a DevRel 100% available to help the community if they wanted to build. And the last thing that we did was to take part on LabitConf, right? Also to like have conversations with everybody. This was almost like 2 years ago. And what happened after 2 years is that now El Salvador is passing on a legislation that addresses other crypto assets and also like stable coins. So like, and this is what I mean. It depends on the market maturity and it depends on the market readiness. In contrast to that, I can tell you about an experience in Brazil that was super interesting. Like last year was a very relevant year for the whole Brazilian community. We kicked off January with the launch of Celo Real, the third stable asset on Celo, decentralized, community-led, and there was like an amazing adoption. I think there were 5 or 6 cash-in and cash-out options for Celo Real on the launch. After that, we had community taking over, like all social media. We had different initiatives. We had smaller ideathons and hackathons. But in the end of the year, we culminated with a hackathon with the Ministry of Economics to experiment with tokenizing what's worth $400 billion in public assets, in public goods of Brazil. So this is another approach, right? Also based on what the community, can offer and provide, but with another type of positioning. This year too, one of the founders on Celo of a company called Love Crypto was chosen by the Central Bank of Brazil to present a suggestion on the interoperability of Brazilian CBDC and Celo stable assets. So all of this is happening. It's all real. It isn't there. And it's also like a community, right, approach to what different countries are able or available to offer or to want to do, right? What does a country want to do with blockchain? We're not the ones to determine. We should listen to the population. We should listen to the business. We should listen to like what the problems are and provide the tools so that the community builds themselves what they need.
I think that is such an important point, and something that for me, even along this journey, has also been something to continuously check myself on, and this idea of like Latin America as a continent. While, yes, as you mentioned, we share so much. We share good food, we share really warm environments, we share a lot of history from a colonial standpoint, we share, a very similar legal framework throughout the entire region. And also at the same time, each country and region is so unique and so specific, particularly in the context of crypto, right? So El Salvador, for example, obviously like mega Bitcoin friendly. And on the other side of that, you might have a region that is like not at all amicable to crypto. Bolivia, for example, where you are forbidden from transacting with crypto, right? So I think that that is such an important point. And the only way that you are successfully going to learn how you're going to approach and deploy a successful solution is going to be by listening to the community. So I'm so glad that as you guys are deploying these solutions, you're going about functionally looking to say, hey, what do you need, right? And how can Celo potentially serve as a solution to those challenges? So, and on the DeFi front, so what have you seen? Like, I'm wondering if you could perhaps like pull a couple of examples across your experience where you've seen specific projects, or what challenges have you seen in each region or each country where Celo has looked towards deploying a solution specifically within DeFi.
Very interesting point. The first thing that is necessary, much needed, it's like cash in and cash out, right? And why cash in and cash out? Because when we are talking about like building for everyone, we cannot expect that the people who are going to be using DeFi in Latin America, they are already crypto natives. So how do we remove like the barriers? How do we remove the friction of getting into like the crypto world? So cash in and cash out, on and off ramps has been something that is dearly, it's a dear mission of the Celo community as a whole. There's even a program that was launched. It is called Connect the World. We can have, I don't know if we can post like a link somewhere nearby this podcast, but I know that some grants are still available through that program. Initially had $20 million to allow builders and all over the world to build the rails that would provide cash in and cash out options for Celo assets throughout the globe. This is a reality like in over 100 countries, including most countries in Latin America. All the cash in and cash out options, not all, but most of them, right, are available on the website for Connect the World. And what is interesting to see is that sometimes there's one missing link still in one of these countries or these communities. And I can give like an example here that happened just like last week. So I usually stay in Brazil or traveling throughout Latin America, but right now I'm in San Francisco in the offices of Celo. And I met two people who work here. It's a couple, and they are actually from Guatemala. And I spoke with them. I said, hey, have you ever used crypto? And they said, no. And I said, let's do a trial. There are different things that you can do with crypto, this, and that. And then I taught them how to use Valora. And I gave them like some Celo dollars. And the funny thing is that I didn't give like enough to buy a pizza to one of them. I gave a portion to one and a portion to other to see if they could like make the transactions. And then I taught them how to like buy a voucher to buy a pizza. And I said, this would be like use case number one. Like, can you use crypto to buy something? And then the answer was yes. They arrived the next day with a picture eating pizza. It was perfect. The second thing that we wanted to do, it's remittances, right? Or to send money or to send crypto to their relatives in Guatemala. And then I found out, looking at the Connect the World website, that I think there are 4 cash-in options in Guatemala, but there's not a cash-out option yet. So this is one example of something that can be built, because this couple, they told me they spent $6 to like send money to their relatives in Guatemala when they need it. If the situation was taking place, for instance, with somebody in Brazil, there are over, as I said, 5 cash in and cash out options. They're centralized and they're even decentralized options on how this could take place. So what I would say are the most relevant, or the keystones, right, for DeFi on Celo. They're the following: one, cash in and cash out. Secondly, like this technology that anyone can use to propose a stable asset on their countries. It's decentralized, it's governance based. You just go there and say, it's time for pesos in Argentina. What would it take for us to move to the next step? And actually, there's a group from Colombia that is right now working on the 4th stable asset to be for Colombia. So how does this like stack? What are the modular pieces? Cash in and cash out, the stable assets, and then like the works of founders, right, to build the different solutions to use with them. So you spoke with Valora. There's a very interesting wallet in Brazil that's called BitFi. BitFi allows you to pay they have an integration with POS machines, and these POS machines, they're present in over 1 million points of sale in Brazil. So when it comes to payment, you can go out to dinner. You can sometimes go to your grocery store and pay with your crypto wallet. Another thing that this wallet allows you to do is also to pay bank slips. I don't know if this is something that is common for people in the United States or other regions, but in Latin America, bank slips are just like these barcodes that you can pay for anything you need without having a bank account. And that's relevant for different countries for different reasons. One of them is because maybe you don't have a bank account. The second one is because maybe you own money to the bank, but you still need your electricity. So you do a gig, you make a service, you give a class to somebody, and you get this money, and you have a choice. Either you repay what you want to the bank, or you have electricity, or you pay water, or you buy food. So bank slips are something that are super known in Latin America, and it's something that you can also do with this app. Another interesting thing is that this app has an agreement with the oldest bank of Brazil. It's called Bank of Brazil. The Bank of Brazil has allowed individuals to pay taxes with crypto. So that's how far deep things are intertwined. Another very interesting app allows you to do like prepaid credit cards. There are apps that allow you very easily, like for instance, Good Ghosting, right? That now it's changing names and going through a rebranding. They teach people how to save money. They teach people how to stake money. They teach people how to, think about their financial lives in something out of like the day or the monthly spend. I don't know I know this makes sense for people who live in Latin America, but further explaining this concept, a lot of people here, they live day by day, meaning that if they can make money in a day, they can eat and they can have their basic like resources, or they live by month. They don't have savings. So when you have like DeFi solutions playing in a role in which people can learn how to save their money and actually have like a better conditions on doing things, it's awesome. We can also talk about UBI, Good Dollar, and Impact Market doing such a great job by allowing like a flow of resources to people in Latin America. So that's kind of an overview, right? There's so many more founders. I'm sorry if you're a founder on Celo, if we spoke 1,000 times, if I love your project and I haven't mentioned it here. The idea is not to like show, but just to give like one example of different projects in different realms. Oh, and also just to finalize the project that I mentioned, Love Crypto, who is now assessing like the interoperability of like Celo stable assets and a Brazilian CBDC, which would be something amazing.
I love the fact that you can pay your taxes with crypto. Like that is just speaks to the extent to which like there is super, the advancement that is required, right, for one to be able to pay their taxes with crypto is just it's amazing and really exciting to see Brazil also take like a very sort of pro crypto stance in many ways too. And you mentioned this example of this Guatemalan family who we were actually in touch with, and I'm really excited to sort of like walk them through their crypto journey. Remittances. I mean, in Guatemala, remittances make up nearly 20% of our annual GDP. and we have the largest GDP in Central America. The amount of economic value that is low hanging fruit for crypto to play a role in, and to, $6 is low compared to some transfer services can charge you up to $40 to
Wow.
receive the money in your bank account. No, it's ridiculous. So imagine you're sending $100, already you've lost 40% of the value of the transfer, compared to sending money on Celo, which will cost you a cent or less. The difference is just astounding. So, and hopefully we'll be able to get the Connect the World program launched here soon, and get this family their off ramp. So really excited to see where that continues to grow and flourish. And would love to explore a little bit of you mentioned a lot of the different founders, and I'm sure a lot of them are eagerly listening to this, but what has been Celo's thesis around building an ecosystem in Latin America? Like how have you guys sort of thought about the ecosystem that you're developing? Oftentimes, especially if we're sort of looking at things from a zero-sum perspective, competition can sometimes be seen as something that's scary. What's the approach you guys have taken to saying, hey, there are dozens of founders in the Latin American region, if not more, right? Hundreds probably. So how can we support and create an ecosystem for these folks to really collaborate and co-create, and rather than spend duplicitous amounts of energy building the same thing? What does that process look like?
Super interesting question. And it's, of course, like an ongoing work, because there's so much to do when you're building an ecosystem, right? There's the institutional partnership type of approach. There's the communications like realm. Okay, you're doing this, but how do you communicate, in Spanish and Portuguese, like everything that's happening to like attract the founders, but also like to let the community know about what's going on. There's another portion, which is like, what are the resources that we make available for founders on the Celo ecosystem? And that for itself, it's a theme that would take a whole podcast, but like trying to summarize. There are different like journeys that a founder can undertake on Celo. One very interesting journey that I would recommend to everybody is Celo Camp. It's an acceleration program in which you can like enroll. There are like 3 or 4 Celo camps every year. And then you have people who are very knowledgeable in the Celo ecosystem and that play different roles and that wear different hats. You have from investors to institutional investors, to angel investors, to professors, to developers, to business developers, to lawyers, like helping nurture like your company development, like energizing the growth of a solution or one idea. So this is a very relevant path. You go through the acceleration program. By the end of it, you have a small competition. There are VCs that commit like some money to like igniting these founders, right? And what is Celo Camp looking for? So every edition is a bit different. Sometimes there's a call out for specific types of like projects or founders prior to the launch of Celo Camp. Like, okay, now we want to focus on interoperability. Now we want to focus cash in and cash out solutions. I didn't mention in your last question, but there are 2 Argentinian wallets that allow people to receive their wages in crypto. So this is also like a very good like suggestion and rails and use cases. Now we want to focus a bit on community, like what are the projects that can teach people how to use crypto, or the full batches like focused on refi, which I would say is the greater umbrella above all of this. So this is one like path. This is one railway that a founder could like go through. But maybe you're a founder that already has like your project set up. You understand your go-to-market strategy. You just need to go to like another level, of organizing. So there's something amazing that's called the Hitchhiker's Guide for Fundraising on Celo. This is publicly available, like information. You just like type exactly that, and then you're going to have access to a very good material that was crafted by like pros on Celo, and it can be used by other ecosystems. It can be used to other founders. Like the end of the road is just that, like for Celo, there are the VCs and the other types of like where you can get money if you're building on Celo ecosystem. But all the teaching there is in there, like how you assemble your pitch deck. Like, here are some best practices. It's public, it's for free. It's a very good source of knowledge for those people who are more like maybe like far advanced or are onto the DIY type of organizing. Another journey that founders can take on, it's hackathons. And these hackathons, they are going to take place in different countries. Sometimes they're like focused in a specific theme, like the hackathon for with the government of Brazil, right? It had a very specific, clear theme, and which I like, because if you have like a country or an institution telling you like, this is an opportunity, that means that if you're hacking towards like the solution, there might be adoption, right, for what you're building. So you can engage in these different hackathons. There are a lot of refi hackathons. Actually, this is a call out for everybody who's listening to us right now. By the end of this month of March, there will be Ethereum Samba taking place in Brazil. Celo will be co-hosting one hackathon track on refi. There will be bounties available. What we want to see is how to further hack solutions in Brazil and in Latin America. So be all like our guests. Another path that you can take on Celo ecosystem is grants. And grants, it's something super interesting because it's always like kind of a duality, you know. You want to like make these resources available, but are there milestones and steps that are going to be accomplished like by this founder, by this DAO, or by this community? And what does milestones should look like, just so that the community feels the impact and the network effect of what these people are building? Because when we are talking about community money, you need to give something back for the community, right? It's like the responsibility in the end goal is to make the community feel that that money is like being well employed. So like grants, I think it's a huge responsibility for everybody that is dealing with it in the ecosystem. If none of those are your cup of tea, we also do I am every week on Discord, Tuesdays, 11:15 a.m. GMT last 3, which is Brasilia time, available to speak with founders and people who just want to like bounce back their ideas. Right? Sometimes you see an opportunity, you don't know like what's the best way to tackle, or you want to know what kind of partnerships. It's like advice or consulting, and we do this with a group. It's open source, open shared, open knowledge. You go there, you speak your problem. I'll be there. Some other people will also be there, and then this is going to like generate a positive outcome. So, again, Marcus, what we try to do is provide like journeys that could be of interest for specific like profiles of builders, and be as serious as possible, and like sharing our mission, sharing our vision and the way we see the world, to make sure that the projects that are arriving, they're connected to what the community of Celo like stands by.
Amazing. And that's exactly how, it's been perceived. And I think it's ultimately what has led to so many grassroots founders and communities and projects really flourishing in Latin America, is given that you put such a strong emphasis. And this is unlike a lot of other ecosystems in the blockchain space, where it's like, hey, this is like the one program where you can talk to us, and even then it's quite impenetrable. The fact that you guys put a ton of work into saying, in all these different spaces, you can connect with us in all these different ways, I think is like crucial. So, I'm just very grateful, obviously, to the entire Celo ecosystem, and very bullish on continuing to see Celo continue to grow and flourish in that regard, right? So, and on that thread, like let's talk about what Celo, in your eyes, in Latin America looks like if things are maximally successful. Like, where does the future of Celo lie, and what role do you play in the ecosystem, and what does that look like within relationship to other players that currently exist in the space?
Very interesting question, which is the year ahead, right? And after the year before, that was super strong with, again, speaking from a personal like perspective, perspective, I'm super grateful to have been able to like help launch a product, right, which is an open source product, which is Celo. I was also super like I'm also super grateful for being able to like do this to kick off and to kickstart different ecosystems in Latin America, to be able to do this like government level partnerships. What I would hope like to see this year, right, is founders building on top of the existing rails that are in there. And if I can be the person who helps the whole ecosystem, you know, like to sew in like good partnerships, or to see opportunities, or to feel closer to Latin America and its opportunities, that's where I want to be, and that's what I want to do. I think we have the basics, but it's a matter now of like having talent want to build on top of this. And I would like to be, you know, the go-to person to like consult and help, because as I told you, this is my vision of a world that I really like to live in.
Amazing. No, and I know you're already doing like such a great job at that. So we've talked a lot about sort of some of the opportunities for Celo, where you're already deploying solutions, some of the future. Would love to explore the challenges in the Celo ecosystem as well. You know, where do you see, and this has to do with the future question as well. It's like, you know, what have been some of the challenges that you've sort of seen so far, and how is Celo kind of responding to those challenges, and what are you really excited for basically in the future, as far as being able to say, you know, this is something that we're kind of struggling with at the moment, or something that we need to put more energy towards. So what are those, and you know, how is Celo kind of growing in the face of those specific questions?
It's such a complex, yet sometimes day by day or step by step thing to be done, right? There's a commitment that Celo as a community has done, which is to have 40% of its reserve composed by natural assets, that I really want to see happen in the nearest future possible. So that's a question that I ask myself like every day. Okay, this is a commit. It's a community saying we believe that natural assets and the protection of natural assets and creative ways of like doing things, it's how we could advance to, you know, this desired not only like stability but also like rationale of how to live our life. So this is something that we haven't been able to accomplish yet. As far as I'm concerned, at this moment there's only one stable asset, one green asset on the reserve. So how can we really grow that exponentially to the next level? And this is kind of why I have been taking some initiatives, like again, to mention for the 10th time, but the hackathon with the government, and this new hackathon like refi focused in Brazil. This is the one thing that I really think could tip the iceberg for Latin America, especially if maybe, and this is the first time I talk about this in the podcast, we think about not only like nature assets, but also the cultural heritage. How we make sure that we're protecting the cultural heritage and also like creating like value and stability out of that, you know, to go back to our own roots in our own country. And coming from like a perspective of like colonized countries, I think this is something very precious and very special for us to crack the economics on how to protect that. So I would say that the number one thing I would personally like to see happening in Celo community, it's exactly that. We're taking care of our nature and our heritage, and also like making that into maybe the backing of the UBI projects and the stable assets and whatever we use to trade in our community.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, Guatemala, we have 24 national languages here, super diverse population, one of the highest concentrations of indigenous people as well in the world. So I would love to see more cultural preservation and more celebration and value derived and given to these communities as well, because it is 100% at risk. You know, we have some languages that are endemic to two towns here and spoken nowhere else in the world, and to be able to preserve that culture is super crucial. And you know, I just love that this is the type of things that Celo is thinking about and working towards, right? I think there are very few, if none, other ecosystems that say, hey, we care about like the celebration of rich cultures, right? And that's
We have
amazing.
a word for that. We have a word for that. It's called celebration.
Celebration. I
we,
love it.
we write it down when we do it. It's for real.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I love it. Awesome. To wrap all this up, this has been a really amazing conversation, Mila. Super robust. We've covered so much of the Celo ecosystem, the work that you're doing in Latin America, and the future of Celo as well. So, just to conclude things, maybe you can share with the audience a little bit about where they can connect with you, connect with Celo, and engage with the ecosystem that you're developing at the moment.
Thank you once more, Marcus, for this amazing opportunity to speak about, possible futures with you and with your audience. If you're listening to us today, I would like to invite you to get in touch. There are different ways to do that. If you're a founder on the Celo ecosystem or in any ecosystem, and you speak either Spanish and Portuguese, be present if you want every Tuesday, UTC -3, 11:15 a.m. On the Discord of Celo. We just opened this chat. Anything is welcome. You can ask questions and we can flow from there. If you're more a Telegram person, there's the Celo Espanol and the Celo Portuguese. And with the same name, you can also find social media and Twitter, LinkedIn, and on Instagram. So I think there are good ways for the Latin American community to congregate in natural languages without any prejudice. If you want to get in the English channels, they are all called Celo org. But I would really like to see more action going in Portuguese, Spanish, or any other amazing languages that are spoken in Latin America, especially my favorite, which is Portuñol. Portuñol Selvagem, the best language there is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mila. It's been an amazing conversation, super bullish on what you guys are working on. I'm sure the audience will walk away with that same impression as well of the Latin American region and the Celo ecosystem and your role there. So just again, thank you so much and look forward to seeing you soon at some crypto conference somewhere around the world. And that's a wrap for today's episode. Thank you for tuning in and joining us along this journey of discovery and exploration as we look towards the frontier of decentralized finance in Latin America. This episode was made possible thanks to the support of the Ethereum Foundation's Fellowship Program, Lens Protocol, and the Celo Foundation. The EF Fellowship Program is a forum for leaders who are driven by leveraging Ethereum as a public good to help billions of people coordinate and thrive. The fellowship program aims to support individuals who are passionate about identifying barriers to mass adoption and breaking down the barriers for underrepresented communities to access crypto. Lens Protocol is an open source tech stack for building decentralized social networking services. The protocol was developed by the Aave companies and launched on Polygon in May of 2022. Through Lens, Web3 developers can build decentralized social media applications and marketplaces that leverage NFT technology to form a fully composable user-owned social graph, where the connections and interactions between people are owned by individuals, users, and creators, rather than established networks. And if you're looking for a blockchain platform that's designed to work in the real world, Celo might be the solution for you. With its focus on being carbon negative, mobile first, and EVM compatible, Celo is leading the way towards a new digital economy that's accessible to everyone, particularly those in the global south. Don't forget to share this podcast with your friends and family. Let's connect on Twitter at Marcus, DOTAM, as well as on Lens, Marcus.lens. Until next time, keep learning, exploring, growing, and I'll see you on the next episode. Ciao.